Welcome to Audit the News. This is a channel dedicated to reviewing mainstream news reports, testing the validity of their content, and replacing any biased reporting with the facts of the events. In today's episode, we'll be going back to a CNN report given by host Don Lemon on March 17th of 2020. We'll be addressing any mistruths or outright lies within the content of the report. We will begin by watching the report in its entirety before we break down its content. Let's begin.
The president, who has been playing down the coronavirus from the beginning, says this today.
I've always known this is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic.
We're going to go through this because it's important that you should know. It is important that you hold the people who are in charge accountable. It is important to know how we got to this point. That is gaslighting, pure and simple. The President of the United States is gaslighting you, and you deserve to know. Claiming today that he has known all along that the coronavirus is a pandemic. This is way back in January, and I want you to listen to the President's own words in January.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
That was in January. Days later, the CDC announced the first case of person-to-person transmission of the virus in this country. The World Health Organization said the outbreak was officially a public health emergency of international concern. But listen to what the president said in February last month.
We pretty much shut it down coming in from China. You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away.
In fact, we're very close to a vaccine.
We're going down, not up. We're going very substantially down. We have done an incredible job. We're going to continue. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Right around the time, again, that was February, right around the time the president said all of that, the first passengers on the Diamond Princess cruise ship tested positive for the coronavirus. More than 700 people were eventually confirmed to have the virus. But this may be one of the most outrageous claims this president made about the virus.
One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, they tried to beat you on Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. And this is their new hoax.
The coronavirus is no hoax.
All right. Now, having watched that segment in its entirety, let's go back to the beginning and start our breakdown.
The president, who has been playing down the coronavirus from the beginning, says this today.
I've always known this is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic.
We're going to go through this.
Let's do exactly that, Don. On December 31st of 2019, China reports to the World Health Organization an unknown virus coming out of Wuhan that displays similar characteristics of pneumonia. This is when the virus is first brought to the attention of most world leaders, including the Trump administration. Within the next week, reports begin to hit China's mainstream news. The number of cases continue to grow within China and start to slowly reach outside its borders. Nearly a month later, on January 22nd, we have our first reported case within the United States, and are first introduced to the man who will become our main source of information, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Let's hear what he has to say on January 22nd, after the first case arrives to the United States.
This should we be worried about? I don't think this should instill fear in the American public, but as health officials, CDC, the Department of Homeland Security and others, we take this really very seriously, which is the reason why we do the kinds of screening that we're talking about and why the person who did come back from Wuhan into the state of Washington and Seattle was immediately able to be identified, to be isolated, and to put into isolation, and now is doing really quite well, but still is in isolation.
So to recap, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease is saying we shouldn't panic, but this is something we should be taking seriously. 6 days after Dr. Anthony Fauci made that statement, President Trump issues a travel ban to any person from or who has recently visited China. He had this to say.
But we can't have thousands of people coming in who may have this problem, the coronavirus.
Let's look at where we are at this point in the severity of the coronavirus within the United States. On the date the travel ban was first proposed, we had 5 cases within the United States. And on the day it went into effect, we had 11. There were still no reported deaths within the United States at this time. This is a huge decision for the Trump administration to make in regards to our connection with China and how intertwined our markets are with theirs. Following the travel ban, experts and most liberal media outlets were very critical of the matter. The World Health Organization's director says the ban is not needed, and I quickly want to point out a liberal news outlet calling it the China virus very early on, but I digress. The World Health Organization's director states that we call on our countries to make decisions that are evidence-based and consistent. Here's the director in his own words.
There is no reason for measures that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade. We call on all countries to implement decisions that are evidence-based and consistent. WHO stands ready to provide advice to any country that's considering which measures to take.
It is also important to note this is the time where the suggestion of racism in regards to Trump's travel ban first enters the picture. Finally, on March 11th, the World Health Organization first characterizes the outbreak as a pandemic. And that same day, Trump expands his original travel ban to include Europe. So now let's listen to Don Lemon's statement again, knowing the facts related to the development of the virus and the actions taken by the administration up to this point.
The president, who has been playing down the coronavirus from the beginning, says this today.
I've always known this is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic.
So now knowing the facts of the situation, do you think the actions taken by our administration in relation to the precautions outlined by our health experts at the time suggest the Trump administration responded as if this were a pandemic, or at the very least, a very serious issue? Or is he overselling his response? You let me know in the comments below, but let's continue with Lemon's report.
It is important that you hold the people who are in charge accountable. It is important to know how we got to this point. That is gaslighting, pure and simple. The President of the United States is gaslighting you, and you deserve to know. Claiming today that he has known all along that the coronavirus is a pandemic. This is way back in January, and I want you to listen to the President's own words in January.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
Let's go ahead and pause the video right there and reflect to a clip we watched earlier of Dr. Anthony Fauci on January 22nd, the same day as this interview took place. Let's hear what Dr. Anthony Fauci's stance was at that exact same time.
This should we be worried about? I don't think this should instill fear in the American public.
This should not instill fear in the American public. It's easy to look back on statements the president made several months later and be critical on the president's remarks. But you must also present the information the president had at the time when he made those statements. And when experts are saying not to worry, Trump is simply echoing that notion. Now, some people may find his optimism inappropriate, but it's important to understand that's all it was, optimism. Now let's continue.
That was in January. Days later, the CDC announced the first case of person-to-person transmission of the virus in this country. The World Health Organization said the outbreak was officially a public health emergency of international concern. But listen to what the president said in February last month.
We pretty much shut it down coming in from China.
Here's the first clip of a montage that we'll be breaking down. Don Lemon appears to be critical of this statement and the rest of the statements that we'll hear later. Remember, at this point, the president has barred travel from China into the United States. As you remember from earlier, there are already confirmed cases in the United States, 11 to be exact. President Trump is alluding to shutting down new infected people from coming into the United States from China, not new cases stemming from the transmission of infected people already in the United States. Let's continue to the next clip in this montage.
You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. Looks like by April, you know, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away.
Here are two examples of Donald Trump's continued optimism. It's important to note that in both quotes relating to the weather's effect on the virus, Trump uses the term supposedly and in theory. Now, is it appropriate for the president to be optimistic about a very serious virus? That is something you can decide for yourself. But it is, however, important to separate Trump being optimistic versus Trump stating facts. Now let's move on to something more alarming.
In fact, we're very close to a vaccine.
Did you catch that? Let's hear it one more time.
In fact, we're very close to a vaccine.
Did Trump suggest in February that we were close to a vaccine? If so, this is an outright lie. After some simple investigation, this is what was actually said in this address.
For clarity, those with Ebola, when they were brought here, were quarantined, and all the Americans also survived,
I know,
right?
but the level of death with Ebola, you know, at the time it was a virtual 100%.
But
You
none
would
of the
die.
Americans who came here.
There's a very good chance you're not going to die. It's very much the opposite. You're talking about 1 or 2%, whereas in the other case it was a virtual 100%. Now they have it. They have studied it. They know very much. In fact, we're very close to a vaccine.
This is a very bad look for Don Lemon and CNN. The president in this clip is clearly talking about an Ebola vaccine. To slip this into a montage exclusively discussing the president's statements made toward the coronavirus is extremely disingenuous. But let's continue.
We're going down, not up. We're going very substantially down.
This is a point I'm still a bit confused about. First, let's listen to the entire statement from the president's coronavirus address that this clip was pulled from on February 26th to get more context.
Mr. President, the doctor at CDC just talked about dusting off preparedness plans, but coming from you, it has more weight. Do you feel like U.S. schools should be preparing for a coronavirus spreading?
I would think so, yes. I mean, I haven't spoken specifically about that with the various doctors, but I would think so, yes. I think every aspect of our society should be prepared. I don't think it's going to come to that, especially with the fact that we're going down, not up. We're going very substantially down, not up. But yeah, I think schools should be preparing and, you know, get ready just in case. The words are just in case. We don't think we're going to be there. We don't think we're going to be anywhere close. And again, if you look at some countries, they are coming down. It's starting to go in the other direction. This will end. This will end.
So I'm not entirely sure, and the president doesn't make it clear what he's alluding to when he says it's going down, not up. If you have any guesses, feel free to list them in the comments below. He could be referring to mortality rate, to the speed of the spread of the virus, but if he is referring to the case rate, he is lying. Let's look into this. So leading up to the 26th, when this address was held, you'll notice a continuous rise in the number of cases. Again, he does not explicitly say this is what he is alluding to. However, I do not believe Lemon's leap is unreasonable in this case. Let's continue.
We have done an incredible job. We're going to continue. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Let's go ahead and stop there. This is not a great statement from the president. There is no evidence to support that the coronavirus will just disappear. If this was another case of Trump being optimistic, it would have been very beneficial for him to allude to that, like he did in the two other clips we viewed earlier. Let's continue.
Right around the time, again, that was February, right around the time the president said all of that, the first passengers on the Diamond Princess cruise ship tested positive for the coronavirus. More than 700 people were eventually confirmed to have the virus. But this may be one of the most outrageous claims this president made about the virus.
One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, They tried to beat you on Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. And this is their new hoax.
I'm not sure you noticed a subtle cut just before the president says, and this is their new hoax, but it's important to note. Let's go back and look at the president's remark during the rally that this clip was taken from and see if Trump actually is referring to the coronavirus as a hoax, or rather the media's negative coverage of the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus as the hoax.
But while we're building a great future, the radical left Democrats in Washington are trying to burn it all down. They have spent the last 3 years, and I can even go further than that, 3 years since the election, but we go before the election, working to erase your ballots and overthrow our democracy. But with your help, we have exposed the far left's corruption and defeated their sinister schemes. And let's see what happens in the coming months. Let's watch. Let's just watch. Very dishonest people. Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. They're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good, not good. They have no clue. They don't have any clue. They can't even count their votes in Iowa. They can't even count. No, they can't. They can't count their votes. One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, they tried to beat you on Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. They've been doing it since you got in. It's all turning. They lost. It's all turning. Think of it. Think of it. And this is their new hoax. But, you know, we did something that's been pretty amazing. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great. We are so unified. We are so unified.
Does the statement sound a little different when you have the extra context? I don't think Trump is referring to the coronavirus as the hoax. That would be extremely foolish of him. I believe rather he's referring to the negative criticism he's getting in response to the coronavirus as the hoax. If that wasn't enough context to reach that opinion, let's go ahead and look at another statement from the same rally.
We are you take a look, magnificently organized with the best professionals in the world. We're prepared for the absolute worst. You have to be prepared for the worst, but hopefully it will all amount to very little. That's why I tell you, when we have the flu at 35,000 people, and this one is, we have to take it very, very seriously. That's what we're doing. We are preparing for the worst. My administration has taken the most aggressive action in modern history to prevent the spread of this illness in the United States. We are ready. We are ready. Totally ready.
Now, I believe the president's comments that, and I quote, "we are taking this very seriously," shows that he does not believe the virus itself is a hoax, but rather the media's coverage of his response to the virus as the hoax. I believe CNN and Don Lemon creating an entire 30-minute long segment based on that notion is extremely disingenuous. Let's hear the final point, and in all clarity, this was a few minutes later in the program, but I feel it's a better place to end this video. Let's listen.
This is gaslighting, pure and simple. The President of the United States has been making demonstrably false statements from the beginning of all of this. At a time when real leadership could have saved lives, he caused a lot of people to think that this virus wasn't a serious threat.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think the president's comments and actions caused people to not take this virus seriously, and in doing so costed lives? Feel free to let me know what you think of Trump's response to the coronavirus in the comments below. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe so I can keep making more of these. Thanks for watching.